A key component of the modern world economy, the chemical industry delivers products and innovations to enhance everyday life. It is also an industry in transformation, where chemical executives and workers are delivering growth and industry-changing advancements while responding to pressures from investors, regulators, and public opinion. Discover how leading companies are approaching these challenges here on The Chemical Show. Join Victoria Meyer, president of Progressio Global and host of The Chemical Show, as she speaks with executives across the industry and learns how they are leading their companies to grow, transform, and push industry boundaries on all frontiers. Here's your host, Victoria Meyer.
Hi, this is Victoria Meyer. Welcome to The Chemical Show. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you helping to make The Chemical Show the #1 podcast in the chemical industry. And there is still room for us to grow and increase our impact. So how can you do that? Share the show with a colleague or a friend, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review on Apple, Spotify, Podchaser, or one of your favorite podcast apps that you listen to. And if you're not a subscriber, just head on over to thechemicalshow.com, where you can subscribe directly from our website to your favorite podcast player and also subscribe to our mailing list. So as regular listeners, each week, you guys know I interview executives from across the industry discussing key themes: sustainability, supply chain, innovation, digitization. Today, our focus is digital and chemicals with a couple of special guests. Jay Bhatia, who is the CEO of Agilis Commerce, and Christophe Cabarry, who is the CEO of SpecialChem. This episode, and you guys that are here live with me know, is being recorded as part of the Chemical Show Live. It's also getting published as a podcast through all of our regular channels. So super excited to have Christophe and Jay here. Welcome to The Chemical Show.
Thank you, Victoria, for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Christophe, I would like to start with you. What's your origin story? How did you get involved in chemicals, and what led you to start SpecialChem?
Well, like Jay, I'm coming from the chem industry. Before starting SpecialChem, I spent like 8 years working for a company you would call today Arkema. And basically, I had different jobs in different, in purchase, marketing, and strategic planning. And I created SpecialChem out of the frustration to be a marketer in the chemical industry. Marketing is so important, and in specialty chemicals in particular, to create innovative products, understand where value is created, differentiate your products, find the best markets. It is very important. At the same time, it is very difficult in our industry because it is very fragmented. It is dealing with hugely complex value chains all over the world. So marketing, very complex, very needed. I created SpecialChem to resolve this tension, to make a better marketing, provide digital marketing services to the chem companies so that they can make it faster, more scalable, more predictable, more effective, less expensive, et cetera, et cetera. That's the story of me starting SpecialChem, coming from the chem industry.
Awesome. That's good. And I know we'll probably get back into some of those elements later. Jay, how about you? Share a brief intro. And I know, in fact, people that have been listening for a while know that Jay was, this is his second time on The Chemical Show. He was also on episode 5, way back at the very beginning of our journey together. In fact, we were just chatting that on that first episode, we actually had to record it twice because our audio was so bad. And then after we listened to it, we're like, oh gosh, let's do that over. This time is a one and done deal, so we're going to make it awesome. But Jay, go ahead and give us a brief intro to you. And then also share with us a little bit of how Agilis has evolved since we spoke 2 years ago.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Hey, happy to be on the show again, and congratulations. You have made the chemicals the podcast for the chemical industry. I'm very happy to see your growth. From that point of view, we both are in the same boat, getting our startup venture into the orbit and scaling it up. So those who don't know me, I'm a chemical industry veteran like Christophe. I spent 20 years in the industry working with some of the leading global players like BASF, Shell Chemicals, Hexion, before starting my entrepreneurship journey. So I started Agilis, 5-6 years back now. It's amazing, 6 years now. And having a fun journey. Like Christophe, I see the challenges in the chemical industry, which I was always scratching my head that this is a $5 trillion industry, one of the foundational industry, which has helped transform a lot of other industries. So why can it not transform itself by using some of the latest technology tools? So that was my call to action, and loving it, every bit of it. So you asked me how Agilis has evolved since we talked last, which was in May 2021. Yeah, so first of all, we have seen tremendous growth in the past 2 years. Just like I mentioned in that podcast, that during the pandemic brought the awareness, but the real action happened after the pandemic was over, because during the pandemic, people didn't have bandwidth to start new projects, although they recognized the need for digital. But as soon as the pandemic got over, they were all ready. A lot of producers and distributors were ready with the budget, with the projects, and we've been busy like hell. So that is a good thing. So we have grown both in terms of customers as well as platform development. And then a couple of things. One, most importantly, we are not how we have evolved based on the customer feedback and building for customers. So we are not only an e-commerce portal company. We are still within the digital commerce, but digital commerce means a lot more today than just 2 years back. So we have our whole platform has evolved into a modular fashion. So we have 6 distinct modules. I won't go into the details. I don't want to make a sales pitch, but suffice to say that everything we have built is based on the customer feedback and specific use cases from chemical producers and distributors.
That's interesting. And you've also changed your name, right? So you went from Agilis Chemicals to Agilis Commerce.
Yes, and that we recognize that, just like any startup, you just start with whatever makes sense, and then you get a market feedback. And then we saw that a lot of our customers or prospective customers were getting confused with the name in chemicals generally implies you are a producer or a distributor.
Right.
So we wanted to make it very clear that we are not in your business. We are here to help you improve your business, but we are not your competitor. And then so that was the reason behind changing the name, which brings more clarity and more focus.
Yeah. Awesome. So Christophe, you've been involved in digitalization for almost 2 decades now. How has it evolved since you started? I mean, I think back, I was involved in digitization. We didn't call it that 2 decades ago. But from your perspective, having, stuck with it, what's changed? What's different today versus where you started?
Well, we started with the vision on how the digital technologies would enable marketing and overall the chem industry to connect better to the markets. This vision, I think at that time, is still the vision we have today, except that we were 2 decades too early. Basically, what we were envisioning that would happen maybe in the next years, just after the year 2000 would happen just after, they are happening really now. So we were a bit early in our vision. So what we have been observing since then is not a revolution, but an evolution of the chem industry regarding digitalization. It's a long process, very, let's say, transformational, but a step-by-step transformation. So let's say at the beginning, this industry is a very asset-driven industry. We all know that. It is very conservative because it is asset-driven. Well, lots of money are put into building plants, and also because it is dealing with dangerous products. So it is very conservative, more than every other industry I know. And so if you are bringing to this industry digitalization, innovations that are helping to improve efficiency, everybody likes that. But as soon as you change something that you are just derailing a little bit, changing a little bit some processes, then it is becoming, refractive to change. So what changed is not the industry. the customers of the industry have been changing quite recently, and because they are changing, then our industry is changing by this pressure, this osmotic pressure that comes from the bottom, from the value chains. Most notably, what happened, let's say, in the last 5 to 7 years, I would say, is that the customers are now in the driving seat. In the analog age, before that, when I started my career, let's say the customers, didn't have much to say. We as suppliers, we were visiting, I've been doing that myself quite a bit. We were visiting the customers when we wanted, when we had time, and we were pitching our product. Right. And it was a sales pitch. Today, in the digital age, they are in control. They determine when they want to interact with you, through which channel they want to interact with you. And the very first contact between a buyer and a seller is now a digital contact.
Yes. So
the very first contact is not with a human, but with an interface that is digital. It can be a website, it can be a webinar that is recorded, it can be a customer portal. It is almost systematically a digital one, and it is happening when they want. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is changing tremendously. All the more as now they've got the choice to interact through different channels. Also, not only the moment, but also the channel. So they are really in control. And this is a complete reversal of the first contact that is changing the industry, and to the extent that the younger generation, they have been raised, the millennials have been raised in this mindset, and today they let's say 50% of them, this is an official Gartner survey, 50% of them prefer a seller-free experience when they purchase something. A seller-free experience in an industry that is still relying on sales forces to visit out customers in a very large majority of cases. So that's a big change. That's a very big change. And this is explaining why the industry is moving, let's say, the last 5 years. Because of that, the leaders in the industry are understanding that and then changing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think a few things that just to unpack a little bit. One, I think the shift from pull to push is really interesting, right? So, I mean, I was involved in doing some e-business startups inside of Shell a couple of decades ago, shortly after Y2K. And it was definitely a push. We were pushing it out to our customers and hoping they would engage. And I think this switch to being more of a customer-driven, a pull from not just the customers, but I mean, the other thing you talk about is we've got a lot of digital natives. As we look at the younger workforce coming into the industry, they've grown up digital. As we look at what we do on a personal basis, so much of what we do is digital research, digital booking of hotels and flights and what have you, that there's this absolute expectation that it translates into the B2B experience. And I think that becomes really critical in terms of this evolution and in the evolution of mindset, that it's less about what's in it for me as opposed to what's in it for the customer. And it has to be really customer centric. So I think, what prompted this episode and the Chemical Show Live is seeing an announcement between Agilis and SpecialChem that you were partnering to launch a new solution. Can you touch on that briefly? Maybe, Jay, can you touch on that briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. I think so, as I've said on the last episode, the challenge in this industry is huge. It's not unsurmountable, but like Christophe described, because this is an asset-driven industry, the companies, chemical producers and distributors are used to doing business certain way, but also implementing software only through IT departments, through capital projects. Yeah. So we firmly believe that challenge is big enough that this is not just one company can solve it. We are here to collaborate and work with other companies wherever we find that it can benefit customers. So this is all about keeping the customer's view in mind. How can we build a better solution. So we bring the software, we have built the software expertise, we have already built something unique for the chemical industry, and SpecialChem has 20 years of experience in dealing with the product data. So they are today the largest product catalog platform in the industry. So they have a lot of expertise in how this product data should be structured, configured, what buyers are looking for, how they want to access the product data. And then, like Christophe said, when the first contact is digital, everything starts with the product data. Today, in this industry, more than 1 million product catalogs are locked in PDFs. And even those, a lot of companies who claim that we are online, they put basically PDF documents online. That is not it. Your product data is super valuable. You need to, you can literally turn that into a good customer experience and the market intel tool by digitizing every aspect of product data. So that is where we see an opportunity to make things better in the industry for the customers. And that's why we have partnered with SpecialChem.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that's really helpful. And I think across the industry, what we see is in new entrants and new innovators in the industry, a lot of where the growth and the collaboration is through partnerships, right? So because you can optimize both of your knowledge bases, resources, know-how, et cetera, to make something better. So maybe let's, and I know that you guys have both had opportunities along the way to partner with companies. What do you find to be critical? Because I think this is an area that a lot of companies struggle with, is figuring out how to select the right partners. What's critical in a partnership? What do you look for? Christophe, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I think the most important is to share values and vision, first of all. So of course you need to be complementarity in your assets, in what you do, and combine your assets the right way. But if you don't have the right culture or the alignment on culture and vision, well, then it's impossible. In our case, what unites us, I think, is the fact that we both come from this industry, Jay and I, from different companies, but we share the same. Also, I would say, passion for this industry. We criticize it quite a bit, but I think we love it, to be frank. And it's the complexity, the variety, how strategic it can be. It is, driving value in every other industries. I think we really share the same values on that. And we also share the same vision on how it needs to evolve. And by the way, a number of startups that raised a lot of money, recently, they want to disrupt, rip off a part of the value from the value chain to their benefit. That's really not our view of things. We are all about enhancing, making it possible, having different kinds of solutions, variety of offers, both of us, that we can tailor, craft, and offer to the different companies, having different needs, different level of maturities, and we are really sharing that with Jay, to be honest. And then
That's awesome.
we're approaching the same thing with two different angles. They do software and e-commerce. We are more service-enabled platform dealing with digital marketing. And what is the overlapping part is the product information. To sell product, you need information about the product. To market the product, you need product information, documents relative to the product. And we thought here there is a lot to be done in the industry, because if you look at this product information, historically, it has been managed in a very poor way. It is disseminated in many different, software, in emails, in Excel sheets, in hard drives. Honestly, there is no platform for product information like there is for customer information. Every industry, every company now is putting their customer information into a CRM. Well, this needs to happen, and it is in fact happening for product information. Digitalizing, platformizing the product information. This is absolutely a cornerstone in every digitalization roadmap.
Helpful. So Jay, circling back to you on partnership, I know. So what we've heard from Christophe in terms of shared value, shared vision, what else is on your list in terms of what's critical in a partnership?
I think so. I would expand on what Christophe said, is the shared vision. So I think that is the first and foremost, but also the meeting of minds is the number one. And then the complementary nature of whatever you're doing at the core business. Yeah. So what Agilis does and what SpecialChem does is very complementary. They are focused on helping producers how to market products more effectively. We are focused on how to take that more sales-driven approach, the digital commerce part. And of course, the product data is the engine for both of these activities. So having a shared vision and values, the complementary nature of the business, and the complementary skill sets among the workforce. So SpecialChem has a pretty big team who are experts on product catalog. We have one of the best software engineers in the chemical industry who are focused on building a software for the chemical industry. Yeah. So that is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, every partnership is like you have to make it work, right? So it's like a marriage.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So Jay, you maybe touched on this a little bit. During the pandemic, we saw real acceleration in digital. Frankly, because as we were all home-based, or many of us, I mean, some people were still in the office, and obviously our manufacturing employees were hard at work at manufacturing sites, but just the changes that since the beginning of the decade, we've seen this acceleration in digital. Is that persisting as people go back to the office and we go back to, let's call it quote unquote business as usual? Do you see it slowing down? What's happening? What's happening in the land of digital from that perspective?
So the digitalization and digital commerce is accelerating as probably one of the fastest pace that I have seen in the last 6 years, and probably Christophe would reckon that he has seen in the last 26 years. And that is because, as I said, during the pandemic brought the awareness, but the companies didn't have bandwidth, because along with the pandemic, there was a supply chain crisis. And then specifically for chemical industry, Texas freeze, what happened in your area, that threw up the entire industry. And that, like, for the last almost entire 2021 and quite a big part of 2022, suppliers were struggling to even meet the current customers' demand. So in fact, that is why digitalization or digital projects have accelerated as industry has come out of those firefighting mode. But the real change is, like Christophe said, is the customer expectations. Nothing will move a supplier more than a customer expectation. The customer's expectations have completely changed. Digital is no longer nice to have, it is a must have. And that is driven by customers' need.
Yeah. So that's a good segue in terms of the value, right? So when I talk to people across the industry, there's often this question of where's the value, right? So there's a concern that as they digitize their sales process, they're not necessarily adding to their bottom line. It is a costly implementation from a variety of places. So when we think about digital, so we look at customer-facing application and investments, what do you see? Where is the value? And how do companies build a business case for digital and chemicals?
Victoria, I've been asked this exact question like 5 years ago by the CEO of a Japanese company. He asked me, okay, we are embarking with you in a program, and we are going to change our company, the way to work. But okay, what my ROI is going to be? So my answer, a provocative answer, has been, do you measure the ROI of your phone? Why that? Well, because to do business, you simply need a phone, don't you? Yes, for sure. So to do business in the world where customers are digitalizing very fast, you need to do it, or else at some point in time you will be out of business. It is honestly as simple as that. Long run, of course, in a less provocative way, it is possible and even recommended to when you are implementing a new software, when you are hiring a team to digitalize, you need to have a roadmap. You need to have an intention. You need to have an objective. You need to understand how you're going to create value by removing FTEs, freeing time, doing stupid things in more value-adding things, and of course, getting new customers, better managing prices, of course. And I think you can really do that in every aspect of your digital roadmap. But at the very beginning of a digital roadmap, when you change, it is quite frustrating because you cannot measure the results. It is all about building the foundations, doing the hard work, doing the things that will not pay off immediately. And you should not get discouraged at that moment. The ROI comes after, where you can measure, when you get the first result, the first successes, then you see, oh yeah, we were right in doing this. Here we could have done things a bit differently, but overall this is kind of positive. And then you can, go to the next steps of your roadmap, which is never ending, by the way, because I don't think we will ever see the end of the digitalization of the industry. It's a process that is here to stick. And to the question before, really we have at the beginning of 2022, we think at SpecialChem that for the vast majority of the companies, more than 80% of them, there was a tipping point. There is, let's say, maybe 20% of them saying, yeah, you know what, we're going to go like we did before, the good old trade shows and our sales guys visiting again our clients. But for 80% of them, they understood, yeah, you know what, things will need to change. We cannot go back like before. So these guys, not all of them calculated an ROI when they said that, but they knew they had to do it.
Yeah, so it's a bit foundational. I mean, I think we recognize that, right? We have to do something. But what's interesting on that too, so I think, so there are a couple of things. There's a bit of a leap of faith, which frankly, executives in the chemical industry are not very good at, because we can manage and measure really effectively what the investment in a new heat exchanger is going to do for us. Harder to measure leaps of faith in the digital landscape. So that's one thing. But it also strikes me that, one, just having the roadmap, two, just, that there's other questions that must arise. So when you look at this, and Jay, what are the biggest questions and concerns that companies have when they're considering a digital investment? And frankly, I'm just going to go one step further and plant the seed with this, that people, I think, sometimes don't know where to start. So what are their questions, and how do you help them know where to start? Because that's often the hardest thing to do.
Right. You're bang on. Actually, you started answering the question that you asked. The biggest challenge that we see for companies is where to start. That is the first challenge, because digitizing or implementing digital commerce, it is across the organization. It impacts almost all of the functions, but most importantly, it impacts your customers' life or how they do business with you. So that is where the biggest concern comes from chemical producers and distributors. Oh my God, if I invest, even after investing this millions of dollars, is my customer going to adopt it? Are my internal users are going to use the channel? Right. And so that is the more scary part. And then this is where, I think, so my perspective here is that this is also because the industry is used to that asset-driven mindset that everything needs to be a capital project. All IT implementation is a capital project. It needs to be squared down, every square, comma and full stop, and button down 2-year project implementation team. And you spend literally millions of dollars, even a single user will use the software. Well, we say
and
that,
also,
look,
by the way, I'm going to interject on this, Jay, and you feel stuck because you made a choice and you feel like you're stuck with it forever.
Yes. And even the reality is the software world moves so fast. Within that time, 2 years that you're implementing, things would have changed so much. So our view is that modern software doesn't get deployed this way. This is modern software, especially if customer is a user, you cannot afford to spend 2 years in configuring your solution. You need to take a lean startup approach, launch your MVP, minimally viable product, get customer feedback as soon as you can, incorporate that feedback and iterate your solution. And that is where this software as a service model, a lot of other industries have adopted. Chemical industry is relatively new to that. But that is where that model minimizes your risk because you are paying per use. You're not spending millions of dollars in implementation. But most importantly, it accelerates your speed to market. You get your customer feedback within 3 months. And that is very critical. And then, so I think, yeah.
Who has to be convinced? So I think about, you talk about the traditional software implementation. A lot of it was the IT department. If I think about SAP,
right,
maybe had a little bit of a business component, a whole lot of IT, and then business pain at the end as you try to use it. When you think about these new platforms, yours and others, who's in the driver's seat inside your customers?
Yeah. So it differs from organization to organization, but for us, we start with the business leaders because digital commerce is not your typical IT solution. It is the sales channel. It is going to impact the life of your customers and your breadwinner sales and marketing teams. So business has to have an outsized say in that matter. Because and this is where also when it comes to digital commerce, it's more than an IT solution, more than an IT tool. It is your customer engagement tool. It's your business development tool. So we always start, and business leaders have a bigger say. And then, of course, this I don't want to trivialize. These organizations are complex. So, of course, IT departments have a much bigger say, and they are the ones who will be implementing. They are the ones who are accountable for whether the solution works or not. And that is where there needs to be a meeting of the mind, and that's a complex process. This is like a multi-stakeholder environment where you have to make sure that every step of the way that everyone is aligned and moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So it strikes me that risk management plays a big role in this as well, right? So there's the customer risk, the implementation risk. And when we think about software as a service, it's the security risk, the cyber security risk, I would imagine, is a big concern to companies. How do you tackle that? So what do your customers typically see as risks? And how do you tackle that, Christophe?
Well, in the specific case of SpecialChem, this is, of course, a very, very important matter, getting protected. And we got trainings within our teams all the time regarding security. We are testing our people because most of the time the cracks are the people into the organization. So training people is very, very important in this domain. But I would say for a SaaS product, it is obviously you got best practices and you got qualifications of your software regarding the security norms you need to respect. That Ionic PIM, our solution, is definitely respecting. And so it is quite norm right now because SaaS is such a huge part of the economy, not just the business part of the economy, that it is something because the risk is so generic and systemic. There are rules that when applied guarantee a really high level of security. It cannot be 100%, never, but really very high.
Yeah. And I would like to add on that. I mean, of course, cybersecurity risk is real and present danger, and no company is outside of that, right? I mean, even today's environment, even some of the best well-run organizations will also get hacked. So it is a continuous task. Every day you have to make sure that your software is up to date. You are using the latest tool. You are updating all the software updates. Your users are using it the right way. I mean, for us, this has been the pretty hallmark of what we do, and we have our engineering team, where the people, some of our engineering team leaders, they come from big organizations who have managed that risk at a much, much larger scale. In the last 5 years, we didn't have a single downtime. Now, doesn't mean that we are immune to it, but my point is that it's a continuous process. And whether small or big organization, you always have to take care of that.
All right. So I'm going to bring us kind of to a close before we move into our Q&A portion. So, just kind of wrapping this in 2023, what is going to be the focus, maybe for your company and for other companies across chemicals as they look at digital and chemical investments? Christophe, you want to start?
Yes. I'd say it really depends on their level of digital maturity. So let's take the least digital mature. Here, these companies, they are focusing on getting the basics right. I mean, here, having a website that works, that looks nice, that can be found, that is well referenced on search engines, having a CRM that is not only a sort of repository for core reports, these kind of basics. The most digitally mature companies, it's a bit different. Here, the big thing is, I think, becoming multi-channel. The big companies, the most advanced, I shouldn't say the big companies, the most advanced digitally, they know that they cannot only rely on their only website to reach out to the market and get reached by the market as a digital channel. They have to be multi-channel and to perform on every kind of channel. I mean here, a customer portal, an e-commerce portal, platforms like SpecialChem, marketplaces, social networks, places where you are going to hire your future employees. So many different channels are important to be successful in this digital environment. And a website cannot perform well for all of these targets, for all of these purposes. So the leaders have understood that, but then they struggle to find the exact channels they need, make a coherence or build a coherence through all of them so that the experience from the customers connecting through these different channels is the same. It means on the back end, you need to have systems that ensure coherence. Like, for example, data is the same. That's a very big challenge, I think, for the most mature companies. Continuously improving their customer experience is also on the top of mind of the leaders. Now I see also integrating with partners, with data. This is also something that is the extension, the next step after adopting different channels, becoming multi-channels. Connecting with partners is something that is also very important from system to system. Getting more value from the data is also something in the mind of every company. But okay, and I mean, if you launch me on this topic, it could last an hour. So I will stop here.
I think you've covered the high points. Jay, from your perspective, what do you see as the real focus for 23?
Christophe has summarized very well. And then I would second that. It really depends on the digital maturity of the company. However, the good news is everyone is advancing on that maturity spectrum. The large organizations, they've done their initial part of the implementation and measuring results with some good, some bad experiences, and they are tweaking their approaches. The medium size and smaller organizations getting warmed up. Everyone recognizes that digital is the must-have, and but I think where the biggest focus needs to be, or where is slowly creeping in, is recognizing that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You need to understand your customers, understand your markets, understand the customer journey, whether you're selling commodity chemicals or specialties or ingredients or plastics. There are a lot of nuances. There are multiple business models at play in this massive industry, and each business model requires a slightly different solution than the one monolithic e-commerce approach. And that is where we have also evolved and continue to evolve our approach on getting more modular.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, this has been super helpful. Christophe and Jay, thank you for joining us today on the Chemical Show. And thanks for everyone for participating and listening.
We've come to the end of today's podcast. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and want to learn more. Simply visit thechemicalshow.com for additional information and helpful resources. Join us again next time here on The Chemical Show with Victoria Meyer.